living his life.
It's a very difficult and confusing time for the employees and visitors here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's not the town of 30 for the visitor center where tourism comes. Saturday is a very busy tourist day here at the Space Center, and there's a huge flag over the American flag flying half staff at the visitor center. And I saw a family, a husband, wife, and their 2 children stepping out of their car to go on a tour of the Kennedy Space Center. And there were a lot of people walking around the flag and half staff. The woman looked at me and thought, what's going on here? She had no idea what had happened. I quietly informed her what had happened. She burst into tears. I did an idea of what people are going through here. There are flags half staff throughout the complex. There's a sign, and you probably can see this line when you're a kid when you drive in. It tells you how many days it is for the next launch, how many days it is for the next landing. And it says 0 days until the next space shuttle landing. And it is a very eerie deja vu for a lot of us. I was here at that point. I know you might have worked in Tampa for a local station. I worked in West Palm Beach, and I was here that day after the structure exploded. It's a very same, terrifying, terrible feeling here, deja vu. Almost 2 decades later, that same beginning year, February 28th, 17 years ago. It's a very sad day here at the Kennedy Space Center in Ohio.
Gary Tuckman, thank you very much. If we look at this picture, the flag at half staff, the other side of the countdown clock, you see launch pad 39A, which is exactly the point at which Columbia left behind 16 days ago. Go back to Canada. It's the shuttle landing facility where we should have arrived 9:16 a.m. this morning. And we have to tell you that did not happen. It's integrated. So we have to do the communication with mission control. Somewhere around
once again, I've heard that a lot, and once again, I'm not convinced. I've heard that, or a similar line, about being, about nature being more powerful, or nature being that much more of an influencing force, or something like that. And no, I don't buy it, not for a second. I mean, there are differences here. I mean, if you head out to the study center in the middle of the night when it's 40 below and it's a 60 mile, it's a 60 below wind chill, and the truck breaks down and you're not prepared for it, I mean, well, you're going to freeze to death. But if you head out into the desert, you're going to die of thirst if you don't have water. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, my father's side of the family that would come from Newfoundland, as if they want to. Long history. When people want to get away, I mean, everybody wants to fisher and get back to the sea, and that whole environment is incredibly empowering. And don't tell me that a farmer in southern Canada whose crop is failing in the field and he has cognizant of $600,000 worth of debt. Don't tell me that land hasn't overpowered him. That nature hasn't nature hasn't brought itself to bear on him several times. I think it's just a difference in environment. It may be rural. Things about that, and that statement changed my mind over the years because in terms of urban versus rural. What are we talking about here? I mean, yeah. But even then, we get away from civilization. Urban centers woods. We go back to nature with what? Divorce themselves $1,200 Kevlar canoes, $300 Mountain Co-op tents, best sleeping bags, cook stoves, dried. So yeah, I'd probably agree. We're not going back to nature the way other people did. We're making ourselves quite comfortable in a wilderness setting, and we're disconnecting from a lot of the kind of creature comforts of home. But we're really not roughing it. We're not throwing ourselves on the mercy of nature. I mean, come on. go out with no food, go out with, you know, a birch bark canoe, go out with, you know, the clothes on your back and, you know, a ratty old bedroll and skin clothing, you know, then do it. You know, do what the voyageurs did.
My name's Roger Woloshin, but I'm generally called Starman as a result of about 20 years of work in the planetarium, where I acquired the name Starman, and so I'm known as Starman on the internet, and Starman here, and Starman anywhere else. I come up here to the Churchill Northern Studies Centre to do courses, little educational courses, 5-day courses in Northern Lights and Northern Astronomy. And I guess I started doing this about 17 years ago. When I was working in the planetarium, I came up to Churchill to photograph a panorama out on Hudson Bay. For some reason or other. There's a broadcaster that worked for the CBC. His name was Peter Zosk. And he did a morning show, 3-hour morning show. I came to the study center, which had just moved. He was very much in tune with everything that was happening. He acquired a truck, and in particular, he talked about the allure of the North. And I thought, well, and sure, when I came back, must be something like that. I'm sure there is. And it never bit me until I actually came to Churchill. And I find this place just starting to be in operation. Fascinating in that it's very much like another place that I like on Earth, which is Alice Springs in the middle of the Australian desert. Both places are relatively small. They are very isolated. It seems to be fairly popular. But the nice thing is that the only people who are there are people who want to be there. So there's no bitching and complaining about jobs and how they hate their work and how they hate this, that, or the other thing. Because if they don't really like it, they don't really stay there. So you have people who are, first of all, reasonably content with where they are, with their place. And secondly, they're people who are living on the edge. You know, when you talk about hierarchy of needs, and how the basic need is for food and shelter, and then you move up the hierarchy and you finally get to education and artistic endeavors and so on. Well, these people are operating at need number 1, which is survival, and the same thing happens out in the desert. And in a way, their success brings them considerable contentment, and they're reasonably happy. And I think that's part of the allure of the North. And the other thing is my amazement at how they are able to survive so well with really not a whole lot of resource. I mean, you can't even grow vegetables here. You can't do anything much, but still they manage to get along. And they get along very well.
I came to Churchill for the first time in May 2001, I guess, and spent a summer here, and then I came back again last May. Summer job. I was in the natural resource management program, and they were looking for a research technician, and it intrigued me because it's really an area that is unique. And the research technician for the center area, so I work on all their long-term monitoring plots in the area. It was something new that they wanted to try. It can get to be a bit isolated. It's good in doses, but it's something that kind of gets you frequently a few miles. Yeah, it gets to be a bit isolated. It's kind of nice to sometimes get away. Depends on the season. When the bears are around, definitely. You realize you're not really the top of the food chain here. You have to always be on the watch. You just can't down south. If you want to go for a walk through the woods, you can do that. You can't really here during certain times of the year.
Pretty much have to, I think, here.
It adds a bit of
There's only
excitement to it as well.
5 or 6 of us, so especially in the busy times. We don't get along. We go our way to help each other. Then the heritage is help. It's a good group of people.
And intrigued me because it's really an area that isn't unique to anything else, especially this area being the subarctic. You get a bit of the tree line, but you
I
get
think
Arctic.
the lack of
There's something new.
more difficult it is to get to Churchill with there only being a train. There's no road access. If that continues along that line, it probably won't really increase in development here. But if they ever build a road or something, then that's going to be probably a downfall to Churchill, I think.
stronger, that nature is stronger than man. I think that's the case all of the time, but you only come to that realization when you're put in a situation like being in the far north. And you take a look at the vastness of this land, and you see that when you come into the north, you cannot live off the land. It is not possible to live off the land. It is strictly a marine-supported environment, and if you're going to live here, you have to somehow live off the sea, not the land. And in fact, the marine climate is far friendlier than the climate on the land, yet that's where we're bound. And not all people choose to do that, and they may not feel that. But you take a look at the land, the emptiness, the spaces, the clean air, the sky, and all of that. Well, Churchill got smaller that just grabs you about it. And I guess the most positive change is the appearance that you miss when you leave. One of my favorite things you have to come back now. That's the exhausting that I mean, he went to these. I had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with the ice caps and so on, because just because he wanted to get back there. He liked being there. He liked being with those people. I enjoyed go there, particularly hearing Churchill, because one of my teams that I learned about early, and I noticed that in that school, and I learned a lot, that there are relatively few students teaching, and here I have an end-of-learning period to teach graduates very well. There's only one student really is ever tried and experience it, and people actually. And I also noticed that they don't know that I do it for free. In fact, they did it for free for many years. 7 or 8. And I would continue if they give me the opportunity. If they're $1 in need, if they're recognized as requiring some kind of my expectations of further education, they don't generally stay here. They're shipped off into the south to other schools. They go, either their parents move away, they go south, or the children are sent to relatives where they are educated in other schools as well. And I guess most recently that situation is starting to change, because there's been a recognition of the problems that exist in the school system here. And there's been some effort made to change.
I can name off 20 different definitions of north. I can name, meteorological definitions, biological definitions, political boundaries. I think certain people take definitions. In my mind, the north is probably. I think it's less.
I was born in the north. I've
delineation
lived in
as much
north,
as it is
pretty much in every region of northern Canada, right from
a psychological one.
the Ungava region.
I think everybody has a certain point that they cross as they travel north that represents North Quebec. For somebody living in suburban Toronto, that may be as far north as, Georgian Bay or wherever they have their cabin. For somebody in Manitoba, it might be. Yeah, I think in make the transition between farmland and forested land pretty close to, for me, because it's where he talks about probably even higher it being an excuse, but one that's neither necessarily asked for or required. I mean, it's not. I think it goes back to what I said before, that it's not necessarily the north itself that possesses some inherent ability to clear one's mind or to escape or to find solitude or to find a living. I mean, I think there's some sort of connection, I think, philosophical. Sure. Well, the farthest north I have ever been is the north. I don't know what northern tip of Staten Island, Admiralty. For them, it's going west. They I just came back from a trip. And I traveled there in 1997. I believe field work for my master's degree. I was looking at different aspects of ring seal in the Western Territories, mostly related to growth and seasonal conditions. So maybe for them, it's one of the things that I was able to do while I was up there was travel on the land with the mountains. Maybe that's their iconic seal. Sort of we would leave community and we would just travel out onto the ice here in Canada. Yeah, the Europe just ends up being that way until late May. It has just a frontier appeal to it, hunting. And as we went, it's moving. My interest was with the seal. After we made a kill, I would go in and I would take certain measurements of the seal because I studied growth and differences and I put them in oral. So I'd agree with that. And I would also, as we were butchering the seal, I would also take certain samples for other researchers. So other than bits of liver for contaminant testing, bits of fat represents some analysis, other materials for genetic testing, that sort of thing. So I mean that was probably what I enjoyed the most about I spent close to 4 months up there, right from pretty much the dead of winter through till spring. But that last sort of month or so where I did that sort of work, I found that the most enjoyable because it was as close as I've ever, I guess, come to living that nomadic existence that Inuit people would have lived, as little as 20, 30 years ago, and some still do to a certain extent, live that lifestyle. There's no one in the north that isn't part of a centralized community. There's no one that hasn't picked and chosen selected parts of Western society that they've incorporated into their own life. But this activity was just pretty much as close to that as you would get. Basically, the only difference would be, a snow machine and a rifle. Once you got beyond that, there was very little different from that activity 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 300 years ago. It's exactly what they would have done at that time of year, just without the technology that we have now.
experienced that personally here in the course. You know, when I started coming here, we would go up to the observing dome, and you can see 4 lights on the runway, from the runway on at Churchill, and they weren't the sodium vapor lights; they were mercury vapor lights. They weren't nearly as obscene or obtrusive, unpleasant, whatever word you'd like to use, as sodium vapors. Now there are 23 plus 4, there are almost 30 sodium vapor lights that pollute the horizon and pollute the viewing from here. Last year I came into town and I saw a row of streetlights. I mean, these are streetlights that lit up the street from here to hell and back, and made the front street, the main street of Churchill, look like Las Vegas. Well, you know, if people want Las Vegas, they're not going to come to Churchill. And they're not going to come to Churchill because of those brilliant lights. They're going to come to Churchill because it's different, because they can get away from those bright lights. So I don't see this incursion of civilization and trying to be like people. Well, I think that the people at the study center, and to some extent the people at Churchill, understand get them a little bit further, and I see that disappearing. If they don't have that sense of community, what they are now, if the show of community and I don't like not there, I don't like it. Then people, because I like to see the people come here and have the northern experience. So if they'd like to stay here, experience what it's like to eat, you will do whatever is required to make the people who come here as guests of the center to feel like they're guests of the center. You do whatever you can. Not only that, it's really not a huge effort, because there are so many things that you could possibly do. Come in and talk about native for somebody, and if you've done all ours as well, and so on. There's nothing else that you can do other than to console them in some way. But we understand that our job, mine in particular, is dependent on these people coming here. So I have to do the very best that I can. Not only that, I have to get along with all of the people in the center here, because they're the ones who are going to make that experience happen for the folks that show up here. I can't do it myself, nor do I want to. So yeah, you're forced into it, in a way. My experience is that, like any kind of power, the power to control nature corrupts. And we begin to think collectively in the South that we can, in fact, overcome Mother Nature. Every once in a while, it is driven home to us that is sheer arrogance and folly. The best example is the flood that we had in 1997. The Red River flooded, and there, no matter what you wanted to do to try to control that, I could even probably, if I pushed it cannot be overcome. But I don't. I've also noticed that for the time bear season is getting longer and longer. It used to be I simply ignore mid-October. 17 years ago, mid-October the bears were gone because the bay was frozen over well enough so the bears. And I know that people can't phone, but more recently, I make it the end of November. They've lost about 3 weeks of, and it has to be some improved bear season by 3 weeks. But in these cases, it's not a very good. We overcome the situation. We succumb to nature for a short time, but very shortly after that. Although very shortly after, I also believe this arrogance takes place, and we start not thinking about ways that gives great comfort. This ever had. If they don't get also, and they don't start to get ready for it, and you see, of course, it will happen. That's a very profound statement, and that means people, particularly people in America, who are very people from the Soviet Union. That doesn't happen here in the North. They're huge polluters of the Arctic. It is not that easy. That we're going to lose. But when you're under those lights, marine environment, we're going to lose a lot of our marine creatures to global warming and to pollution. That's a shame. I mean, it's so pristine here that it kind of makes you and how every time that I look up there in the sky, that it gives me an appropriate response to what my place is in the universe and makes me humble enough. The arrogance is something that we talked about before, and I try not to become too arrogant. The other thing that one philosophizes or induces one to become a philosopher are the lights, because when I'm out there and showing them to people, I feel a genuine joy that they are performing. But when I'm sitting in the dome alone, waiting for them to blaze so that I can go and wake the people up, sometimes I feel like I'm communing with nature. You know, it's like lying down beside your favorite dog and just kind of putting your hand on the pup's head and just being there. That to me is communing. That's some connection, and I feel this connection to the lights. And when that happens, sometimes I think that they're playing just for me. You know, that like I'm the only person there, and I kind of wonder again about the power of it all. When I come down and I'm showing the people, and the lights have been dancing, and it's maybe a little bit cold out or whatever, very often in the parking lot, I will say to them, how are you going to explain this to the folks back home? You know, none of them really give me an answer. And that's how I feel. I can't really explain this to the folks back home. And there are times when I want to share it with them, but there are other times when